So recently, a video of mine called Arrowverse All Marvel References, a video I posted, I think, like 7 months ago, has recently started getting a lot of views, like in the last couple days. For some reason, I have no idea. It's not the most updated version. I posted it a long time ago, and there wasn't really any Marvel DC stuff in the news recently, or like a trailer that was released or anything, or something like that. That is why usually these videos like start getting views out of nowhere. This one was legitimately out of nowhere. The video is copyrighted, so I'm not making any money off of it, so I thought I'd capitalize on the fact that it's getting so many views recently by talking about Marvel Comics existing in the Arrowverse in general. What I'm going to do here is look at all the references in that video, not actually that video, because again, it's not the most updated version, but the most updated version of that video, go over all of them, and go over whether I think they prove that Marvel Comics exists in the Arrowverse. So let's start with the Excelsior reference. If you don't know what Excelsior is, it's a word I'm pretty sure existed a while before Stan Lee came around, but he basically coined it as his catchphrase because of the fact that it's not exactly a Marvel Comics exclusive thing. They don't really own the word Excelsior, and they didn't make it up, I don't think. Because of that, even though it was mentioned 3 times, and it definitely is a reference of sorts, it doesn't prove that Marvel exists at all. So during the second Arrowverse crossover, there was kind of a reference to Avengers Age of Ultron, where the Arrowverse heroes were staying at this farmhouse. Thea Queen, one of the characters, mentioned that she saw something like this in a movie recently, so a bunch of superheroes on a farmhouse. This is referencing Hawkeye's farmhouse and how the Avengers were there in the movie. This is definitely a reference to that movie, but it doesn't prove that Marvel exists because it's not specific enough. She didn't actually say Avengers or Age of Ultron or anything. It could really be a different movie that exists in the Arrowverse. So that doesn't prove anything at all. The third Arrowverse crossover featured kind of a reference to Captain America Civil War, where in the crossover in the second episode, Supergirl did a superhero landing, and right after that said, "Hey everyone," which is exactly what happened in Captain America Civil War, at least in the trailer, where Spider-Man did a superhero landing and said, "Hey everyone." In the movie it's a little bit different. He says some other things and then he says, "Hey everyone," but I do think this is a reference to the movie as well as more specifically the trailer. That being said, again, it's not specific enough. It doesn't necessarily need to be a reference to anything, and it doesn't really prove anything at all. It's just like a nod, possibly. It's not even 100% a nod, but I think it is probably a nod to that movie, but it definitely 100% doesn't prove a thing. In the third part of the third Arrowverse crossover, during the end, at the victory party, Barry, Oliver, and Kara are all talking to each other, and Kara mentions that Barry and Oliver and the rest of them are Earth's mightiest heroes. This is a reference to what the Avengers' tagline, Earth's mightiest heroes. There was even an animated show called Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. This is definitely 100% a reference to the Avengers, but it is not a confirmation of Marvel existing as a franchise. It doesn't really confirm anything. It's not a reference necessarily to anything in universe, but it is a reference to the tagline for the Avengers, at least in our universe, which it probably also is in their universe, but they didn't confirm that at all. There was a reference during the second season of Supergirl to the first X-Men movie, a reference to the scene where Magneto was using his powers to bend guns and stop them from shooting. In the second season of Supergirl, in one of the episodes, Mr. Mxyzptlk, who is one of the characters who has infinite power, mentioned that he saw something similar in a movie where they did the exact same thing with those guns. So this is a reference to X-Men, but it's not specific enough to prove that the movie X-Men exists, but it is pretty clear that it's very likely that it is a reference to X-Men, and that X-Men does exist, at least the movie, in that universe, but again, it's not 100% confirmed. Also, in the second season of Supergirl, one of the characters mentions that the other character is a She-Hulk because it's a woman with super strength. Now, he says a She-Hulk, not like She-Hulk, so a She-Hulk is not necessarily 100% referring to the Marvel character She-Hulk. It could just be a strong woman, and I definitely think that this is not necessarily talking about the Marvel character, so it's not specific enough to confirm that Marvel exists, or that even She-Hulk as a character exists in this universe as obviously a fictional character. In the 4th season of The Flash, one of the new superheroes, Ralph Dibny, who would later become the Elongated Man, a very new superhero at the time, referred to himself as a friendly neighborhood superhero, obviously referring or referencing friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. It doesn't confirm that Spider-Man exists in this universe, but other references definitely do. In that same scene, he's trying to name himself, and he says Mr., which is obviously a reference to Mr. Fantastic, because they have the same powers, but again, not confirmed, not specific enough, and he didn't actually say Fantastic, so these two references in the same scene don't confirm that Marvel exists. Also in The Flash Season 4, there are 2 references to the Hulk through Killer Frost, because they are pretty similar characters, at least in like their dual personality thing. The first reference does not confirm that Marvel exists, but the second one does, and I'll talk about the second one later in the video, basically in the second part of this video when I go over all the references that do prove that Marvel exists from those videos. For now, there is a reference in one of the first episodes of the season where Killer Frost says a variation of the iconic Hulk line, "You wouldn't like me when I'm angry," and she says, "You wouldn't like me when I'm frosty." This is just a nod to that line. It doesn't confirm that the movie The Incredible Hulk exists where they said that line, or it also doesn't confirm that the Hulk exists at all, but there is obviously a reference like I'm pretty sure in the same episode, or at least later in the season, that does confirm that the Hulk exists, and I'll go over that in a little bit. The Flash Season 4 and 5 each have a single Thor reference, respectively. In The Flash Season 4, the Elongated Man refers to himself as Thor, son of Odin, after creating a hammer out of his elasticity powers in his arm. Then in The Flash Season 5, there is a villain with a weapon called the Lightning Dagger, which acts very similarly to Mjolnir in how it's controlled, and Cisco mentions exactly that the weapon acts very similarly to Mjolnir, and even mentions that Mjolnir is Thor's hammer. These 2 references are almost definitely about the Marvel character Thor, like specifically, but that's not 100% confirmed because Thor is not a character who was created by Marvel. He is a god from Norse mythology, so while it's very likely they're talking about the Marvel character, who is a much more popular version of the character, especially like now, but again, while this is very likely talking about the Marvel character, it's not 100% confirmed, so I can't really say that it confirms that Marvel or even the Marvel character Thor exists. So in my latest version of this video, I put in a reference to Ghost Rider because they mentioned Ghost Rider. Now, what I didn't know was that this wasn't a reference to the Marvel character at all. It was a reference to the Top Gun character, I'm pretty sure. I had no idea about that. I've never seen Top Gun, so I didn't know there was a character or maybe something else called Ghost Rider in that movie. But this reference does not confirm that Ghost Rider, the character from Marvel, exists because it's not referring to that character. It's referring to the character from Top Gun. So that is all the references from that video, from the latest version of that video, that don't prove that Marvel exists, but there are a couple that do, and basically the references I'm going to go over answer the question of the title of this video: does Marvel exist in the Arrowverse? Basically, 100% yes. So the first reference I'm going to go over comes from a reference that I mentioned earlier, which is the comparison between Killer Frost and the Incredible Hulk. In Season 4, in Episode 5, I'm pretty sure it was, Killer Frost was one of the main characters, basically the main showcase of that episode, and a guest star Felicity Smoke, mentioned that Killer Frost works very similarly to the Incredible Hulk in how Caitlin Snow and Killer Frost are 2 different people, similarly to how Bruce Banner and the Hulk are 2 different people. This not only confirms that the Hulk exists as a character, but he is popular enough for Felicity to know how he works, basically already confirming that Marvel Comics, or at least the Incredible Hulk obviously, exist as works of fiction in this universe. Obviously, it doesn't stop there. There is a reference in the same season to Professor X, as one of the guest star characters mentioned that the main villain, the Thinker, looks very similar to Professor X. He's sitting in a floating chair, which Professor X does in X-Men Days of Future Past, and also he has these wires connected to his head, which is pretty similar to how Professor X looks whenever he's connected to Cerebro. So this proves that Professor X is not only a comic book character, or at least a character in this universe, or a fictional character in this universe. Also, again, he's popular enough for this character to know a lot of things about him, proving that he exists, and proving by extension the X-Men exist, and adding fuel to the flame that Marvel Comics is a work of fiction and a comic book franchise that exists in the Arrowverse. Another reference proving that Marvel Comics exists come from Legends of Tomorrow, where they mention the first ever Marvel movie, which is Howard the Duck. They mention it as a movie from like the 80s that is very, very bad, which is the exact same case in our real world, which is how Howard the Duck is, I'm pretty sure from like the 1980s, considered to be a terrible movie, and also on top of that is the first Marvel movie ever theatrically released. I don't know if it's the first Marvel movie ever made, but theatrically released, I'm pretty sure about that, proving that at least movies based off Marvel Comics exist, or at least the movie Howard the Duck exists, which I think is enough evidence to show that obviously that on top of Professor X and on top of the Incredible Hulk prove also all the other obscure references that don't prove anything. I think all of this proves that Marvel does exist in the Arrowverse as a fictional franchise, but then there is the biggest hint towards the Marvel Universe existing in the Arrowverse, which is all of the references to Spider-Man. Spider-Man is Marvel's most popular character and one of the most popular superheroes in the world, and it makes sense that out of all the Marvel characters, Spider-Man would be referenced the most. The references we got from Spider-Man showcase him as a very popular fictional character in the universe that it seems like all the characters in the entire world are familiar with, very similar to our real world, like Barry mentioning his spider sense, Jefferson Jackson and Martin Stein both mentioning all of his powers, and Ralph casually calling DeVoe Doc Ock, very similar to how that other character mentioned that DeVoe was very similar to Professor X. On top of that, there was just a name drop of the movie Spider-Man 2, which exists in this universe and is considered by Cisco Ramon to be a very, very good movie, which means we can assume that every other Spider-Man movie ever made exists, including Spider-Man 1, but I feel like this scene right here would probably be a little bit different.
You do too much. College, a job, all this time with me. You're not Superman, you know.
So anyway, that is it for this video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you think that it is pretty cool how Marvel Comics exist in the DC Universe as a comic book franchise, very similar to how our world operates? And do you think that the DC Comics exist as a comic book franchise in like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and other versions of Marvel? Because there were some references to DC characters in Marvel Comics in the past and also vice versa, so I really like the idea of both of these comic franchises existing as comic book franchises in their respective universes, and like they're parallel to each other in that way. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.